the archetypal structuring principle. Jung sort of revived this whole theory of the forms with the theory of archetypes. And the forms are the a priori structuring principles that the universe has been constructed out of. You know, you can point to a horse and say there's this horse, that horse, but the idea of horseness that is incarnated in each one of these horses is this sort of transcendental idea. And it's a sort of frozen sculpture mentality. Don't forget that the Greeks brought the art of sculpture to a perfection that no one else ever did. And so this sort of cookie mold thinking in terms of the forms is what you get with these Platonic ideas. And he sort of situates them within the nous, the cosmic mind that is the mind of God. And then the next level down he gives us the anima mundi. And the anima mundi corresponds to the soul that's moving these planets around. So instead of having, as Aristotle would say, that it's just the ether, now we have to have a soul that's animating the entire thing. So that the nous is static and incorruptible, and the anima mundi is incorruptible, but now it's dynamic because it has to do with the motions of the spheres. So it keeps everything in motion, and it's the soul of the cosmos. And then the next level down from that is simply nature. And nature is based on a composite of form and matter. Neither is nothing really in itself, except you have the divine forms in the nous, the divine mind. But when the two are fused together, you get nature, the visible, phenomenal world, everything that is below the moon. This would correspond to the sublunary world, everything that's in this sphere. This is nature, form plus matter. And then sort of below that, you just have matter at the very bottom, but matter is really nothing but the potentiality for the reception of form. It's nothing in itself. So this is sort of the structural skeleton that Plotinus translates the Ptolemaic model into this vision. And then we have the Christian overlay with Dionysius the Areopagite. Now, Dionysius the Areopagite may have lived in the time of Paul. We're not sure. The one that everybody thinks who wrote all the books on the celestial hierarchies lived in the 5th century AD, so now he's called Pseudo-Dionysius because there's two separate figures here. But he's the one who brought in all the angels and systematized all this and sort of overlaid them with these layers and layers of angels. And what we have with respect to these three hierarchies of angels, there are three levels of 3 each, so there are 9 levels altogether, 3 times 3. And at the top, of course, you have God at the top. And then below that, you immediately have the contemplative angels. This is the first set. And the contemplative angels, of course, are composed of seraphim. This word means makers of fire, seraphim. And the cherubim, and this means those who are filled with wisdom, and the thrones. Then we have the potentially active angels. They're not yet active, but they're potentially active. And we have the dominions, mights, and powers. And then finally we have the active angels. And you can see the differences here between contemplation, the contemplative, the nous, which is incorruptible but static, the anima mundi, which is incorruptible but dynamic, the active. You can see how the closer you get to the earth, the more involved these beings are in the phenomena that goes on. And so the active beings are the archi, the archangels, and the angels. These are generally the hierarchy from which the messengers come, Gabriel and Michael and Raphael and so forth. Because they're the ones closest to the earth and the ones most involved with what's going on in the sublunary world. So now each one of these, in a certain sense, the entire hierarchy is nous, the mind of God, from one point of view. And but from another point of view, each one of these hierarchies is associated with one of the spheres. So now Dionysius brings in angels, which now each are assigned to one of the spheres, and they push the spheres along now. So we have sort of the cherubim corresponding to the Empyrean, even though that's a sort of transcendental world that doesn't involve being pushed or anything like that, but they correspond to that structurally. And the cherubim then correspond to the fixed stars, And then you just have the thrones corresponding to Saturn, the dominions corresponding to Jupiter, the mights corresponding to Mars, the powers corresponding to the Sun, and then below the Sun you have the archai corresponding to Venus, the archangels corresponding to Mercury, and the angels corresponding to the Earth. And then you have the Earth down below. So that's the traditional associations of these things. So now we'll look at some transparencies that show.
I'd like to ask you one question.
Sure.
That at the bottom where you said it's Mercury with the archangels, and now what's beneath that?
The angels and the moon.
Yeah. And then what's the? It looks like you started to write a symbol, but you didn't.
It's just the moon, the crescent.
Oh, okay.
The crescent for the moon. All right. So let's take a look at. These are sort of classical representations of this material, and it always helps to get a visual on these things. This is actually put together by a 20th century German scholar. It's not an authentic image of it, it's from 1985. But I like it for a number of reasons, because it is this guy was a Gnostic scholar, and this is a Gnostic image of the cosmos. And one of the things I like about it that's good for this is this Gnostic sect is called the Ophites, from the Greek word serpent, and they were very much interested in mythology associated with serpents. What I like about it is that it shows you this closed-in vision. Here's the Earth in the center. You have the Earth and Tartarus, the underworld within the Earth. And you have this sort of closed-in cavern vision of the universe. So you can see how the ancients thought of the universe as the center that was very much inside a kind of cave. Later, the sort of Muslim world will come and cut this in half into the dome, but it's basically the same idea, the sheltered idea within which man lives. And then here you have German words for the spheres themselves as you ascend up. Then you get to the Ouroboros. Is another thing that I like about this that you don't find in a lot of these representations is they have this gigantic serpent as the sort of guardian of the world. Saturn is the sort of ceiling of the world, and before you can even get out into the realm of the zodiac, the fixed stars, you have to get past this being. And apparently in this tradition, the soul, in order to ascend, had to have certain passwords to get past these guardians, who are called archons, and in order to get up into paradise, which the serpent is guarding. So we have a reference back to the beings that God set guarding at the entrance to paradise. But the soul wants to get back up into paradise, into the realm up here of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And this Ouroboros is interesting because it's normally, as we'll see, it's normally referred to as the Okeanos, the serpent that is the ocean of the world that bounds the ocean in. And here it's projected on to the entire cosmos. Here, just for a variation, here's a classical image of God at the top with the spheres, and I threw this in because I want to show you how complex this can get. What I've given you is the sort of layman's model, the very simplified version, but normally what you get are just these incredible philosophical encyclopedias where the philosopher will stuff into these spheres everything that he can think of that links with intelligence and the intellectual soul and the cosmic soul. One of these is even a sphere that's associated with the precession of the equinoxes. And here's the Earth all the way down here. And this is sort of illustrates the soul ascending up toward God, going through the spheres, leaving behind the qualities that have occluded its spiritual consciousness as it ascends toward God. And you have these different animas right here. This looks like anima celestis, and you have the animal soul, the vegetable soul, and so it got very, very elaborate, overly elaborate even. And for some reason, he's got the angels up here and the seraphim and cherubim down here, so he's inverted them. And the commentator on here remarks on that. He didn't understand why the order of the angels has been inverted. A lot of times these scribes who were living in these, there were sort of monks copying, sort of miniaturizing the Western tradition and copying these things. A lot of times they couldn't even read what they were writing. So sometimes you get weird mistakes in there. And here's an image of the Anima Mundi itself. This is one of my favorite images. It reminds me a lot of some of the Hindu representations. She reminds me a lot of dancing Shiva, dancing on the sort of dwarf which represents ignorance, and he's entranced by a serpent in front of him, and that just represents ignorance, the bondage of the soul within the material world. And